So thank you very much for coming out this morning for the Internet OTT Media and Hollywood Connection at the Digital Hollywood.
Good to see you.
So
Hey, Will Marks.
what we're going to do today,
All right.
we're going to just find out a little bit about the audience. Then we're going to introduce our panelists. Then we're going to talk about some of the things that have changed in the market since we've gotten together last year. Then we have a panel discussion that will start, and then we'll have questions at the end. So first of all, give us a little bit of idea of the audience. So give us an idea, how many folks in the audience are from the production side of it? Okay? And how many from the technology side of the business? Oh, okay, there we go. So that answers your question about technology. And then business development side. Okay, good. We've got a good mixture of the audience. Who ran into traffic in Los Angeles this morning, just out of curiosity? Wow, only half the audience. That's pretty good. We were talking about New York. You have some serious traffic there, and last year it took me 2 hours to get here from Hollywood. Today I found a shortcut going through Mulholland. It took me about 30 minutes, so it's a good tip getting out of here. Okay, so I'm Steve Wong with Hewlett Packard. I run the business development for the media and entertainment group. And we're just going to introduce our panel members, and if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, I'm going to go through the list and just a brief background of the stuff you guys are working on. So we'll start out with Fabian.
I'm Fabian. I'm the CEO and founder of W12 Studios. We're a digital design agency based in London. We work on various media and technology solutions around Europe and North America, developing a lot of OTT and media propositions in the TV space and the music space. So work with Red Bull and Verizon and CNN and broadcasters and consumer electronics companies on essentially thinking about the future of entertainment.
Wow, well, thanks. We're here to talk about the future, so that's perfect.
Sure.
And Will?
Cool. Will Marks from Ovation Television, and been in the space for about 15 years. Former Disney guy, former Comcast guy. And even though we didn't work together, you did some great work for us over at Intel Media when I was with the Intel team. So yay, thank you. And just happy to be here this morning.
Well, thanks for being here. And I'm going to have to apologize. I sort of hijacked Will and Stephen downstairs. We got into a great conversation about what we're talking about here today. So I apologize for that. So Evan, tell us about yourself.
Hey, Evan Greenberg. I run audience development for a company called TAPP. We make custom subscription video on demand channels for personalities and organizations. In the past, we've had some political channels like Herman Cain and Sarah Palin. We have a pretty strong foothold in the faith space. And then we'll soon be moving into, more lifestyle, sports, a bunch of other things.
Great, thank you very much. Stephen flew all the way from New York, so appreciate flying out.
Happy to be here. Stephen Strong, I'm the head of revenue for Newsy. We're an 8-year-old video news provider targeting the millennial space. So a lot of short-form content we put together into long-form experiences. Last year at this time, OTT was a small fraction of our business, and now it's the majority. A lot of our audience are cord cutters or have never had cable, so we fit really well into that space. Before I was here, I was at AOL and then Viacom before that.
Good, thanks. And Ted.
Hi, Ted Malone. I work for Ericsson in our strategy team for TV and media. Ericsson's one of the largest providers, actually, of TV and media software for both for broadcast television, kind of the whole value chain from compression and acquisition all the way through distribution and consumption. So really the whole platform end to end. We're also right now, because I'm more focused on strategy, mainly working on our next-gen platforms, which are all kind of cloud-based TV and media solutions, very modular, microservice-y kinds of things that make it easier for new entrants to take advantage of some of the robust enterprise TV and media software we have.
Oh, that's great. So a hand for our panel, please, today for coming out. Okay, as you can see, we've got a great cross-reference of content creators, technology, and social media folks and marketing folks. So I think the things that we're going to touch base today are going to be addressed or could be addressed. So again, we want some audience interaction, so if you have any questions, We have some at the end, but if you have some during the talks, I mean, just please raise your hand. So we're going to go through a quick snapshot of what's going on in the market, the changes that we've seen. Some of this stuff has come from Hewlett Packard, what we're seeing just around the world with our Fortune 500 clients, of the big changes, the big things that are happening, and also some other information specifically for the media and entertainment space. Who has folks at MIPCOM this week? Anyone? Okay. So I'm just going to give you some of the quick things that are going on there. Just grab some headlines. So Comcast, Time Warner, Sky Germany, Kabel Deutschland, excuse the pronunciation, Indian Sun Direct, French Orange, Mexico's Telemex, China's Telecom ranks as the world's most powerful global distributors. Which is, when you think of who distributes stuff, where's Warner Brothers and folks like that. So the world is changing. Since the launch of Netflix in 2010, 50 new mainstream SVOD platforms have launched around the world. Multi-screen viewing habits are increasingly at the core of content providers' strategies, and we're going to hear some of that today. And at the end, if anyone wants these PowerPoints, I'll send them to you. This is an interesting point that came up this week. 75% of online video viewers watched a video on a smartphone in 2015. 75%, that's a huge number of that Chinese audience. And you've probably heard about YouTube launching YouTube Unplugged, which is going to be a bundled OTT service. That came out last week, or this week. So here's some of the key trends that we see changing the world in business, but also will affect Hollywood in a number of ways. The innovation disruption is really changing. We started out with mainframe computers, and we did client servers, the internet, and now obviously the cloud is the big thing. When you think of this, not only in production of movies and television shows, but the entire workflow of that. So that is hugely changing this year. When you take a look at security breaches, the average security breach is $8.6 million. We hear Sony, but there's so many other things going on that we need to be aware of. You look at the amount of data that's generated. By 2020, they say 35 zettabytes. An enormous amount of information that's out there. Information about your clients, about you, about these connected devices that's out there. So what that requires storage. I mean, just as a quick snapshot, 60 seconds, 98,000 tweets, almost 700,000 Google searches, 168 million emails are sent, and 217 new mobile users every 60 seconds. So I just want to get back to that. So mobility is one of the huge factors that's changing. And again, as they say, if you're not addressing your mobile audience, someone else is. So some just quick things. The number one investment that we see is Hewlett Packard is folks are investing in mobility. So not only is it just people watching things on their phones, but how people do things in their normal business. It's focused on mobility. So you have to think about a mobile strategy if you're creating content or if you're distributing content. So this is an interesting thing. We take a look at 2010. The worldwide population was almost 7 billion people. There are about 12.5 billion devices. So everyone had a mobile phone and a laptop. So when we look to 2020, we see the population growing to almost 8 billion. But look at the connected devices, 100 billion for 7.6 billion people. How's that possible? Again, 1 trillion applications, and again, zettabytes of data that's going on. Some of the things, thanks to Ted, we see things happening like stress rising in people. If you have a rebuffering issue, basically your stress rises to 34%. This is kind of an interesting thing on this. A 2-second delay watching a video is going to increase your stress by 3%. But once that video starts and it stops, you increase that stress by 15%. I mean, you're engaged, you watch it, and all of a sudden there's a delay. So this is what I thought was really, really interesting, is the transfer of blame. First when it happens, they say, oh, it's AT&T, my service sucks, I'm going to change it. But as it increases, they start looking at the provider. They say, no, it's Netflix problem. I don't like those guys. So that's an interesting change that's occurred. So again, as you're in this space, you have to be aware of that. And again, when you look at the change, you look at fourth quarter 2015, 18 million new mobile devices were added just in one quarter. I mean, that's an absolute game changer in how things are happening. So again, social media. So they say within 6 years, everyone in the world is going to be using social media for at least 35 minutes a day. So when you think about making content, this is part of that strategy is, how do I get the word out? Social media is not going away. I mean, that's an absolute fact. So another thing we see is big data. When you have all these connected devices, there's a number of things you can do. One, you can predict things better if you know what's going on. So this landscape is rapidly changing, right? Before we just had business data. We know if people are buying things and all that sort of stuff. But now we have things like your machines, your cell phones. We have data about that. We know what's going on with those devices. And now we have human data because in social media you choose to input things. So again, this raises the enormous amount of about data. So again, what does this mean for you? Is one, you have to look at analytic solutions, data discovery, how you find this data, and how you manage all this sort of data. So this is one of the big drivers. The Internet of Things, as you may know, you have connected cars that have information, your phones have information, your washing machines have information. So there's enormous amount of data being collected all the time. So the Internet of Everything is people, data, processes, and things, basically. So what this allows you to do is if you have all this information, and when you take a look at Legendary Pictures and folks like that, they use a lot of this predictive information. Netflix uses a lot of this information, on their buying strategy. If they know what their viewers are using and watching, they can predict a lot better. So what this also leads to is security. So, we've heard of the Sony break-in, a few years back, but we haven't heard a lot of it about in this industry. But it's not going away. Again, as Hewlett Packard, we see things holistically around the world. So the average size of the black market is about $1.4 billion, $104 billion. The average fine is about 270% of the annual compliance spend. So if you're basically providing videos to folks and you have their email addresses and you have their cell phones, and that gets breached, then you're open to getting fined because of some compliance issues. This is the other interesting thing. Who brings a cell phone to work that may use it for work sort of things? You may send an email with your cell phone. Anybody? Nobody? Everybody. So 50% of the people are using a device from their home in a workspace that may not be compliant with their security practices, another huge breach. So we take a look at what goes on in a hack world. Basically, when your company is hacked, has anyone's company been hacked here in the last 12 months? Nobody? This is probably why. It takes 243 days for anyone to discover that hack. 84% of these come from applications that may be running on these phones and other devices. 71% is the growth time it has taken to resolve these issues since 2010. This is an interesting thing. Even though companies have, studios have security departments in there, 94% of the breaches are discovered by someone else outside the company. So again, trends, 56% of the companies that have been breached. So you may have been hacked. You may not have known it yet. So again, a lot of these are by third-party mistakes. Some folks that are working with you in a production or in your company that's outside. And this is the average thing. Every breach costs about $9 million or a 30% market cap reduction in your companies. This is the scary thing. This is the big trend that we see happening around the world that I'm sure is going to happen in this time really soon. It's called this malware called ransomware. So what these people do is they go into your system and they don't delete your data. They just hijack it. So imagine if you're on a shoot, you're shooting a movie, and you're out there for, 8 weeks, and all of a sudden everyone out there gets hijacked. No one can access their editing systems, no one can access their phones and all that, and you get an email from someone that says, I want $2 million and I'll release all this stuff. This is a huge growth area for security that in Hollywood we need to be aware of because it's happening. So you've got to basically buy it. You've got to balance things. From your users, you can't lock them down because they're not going to use the things. You've got to balance that for protecting your data and your user experience. So I just run through quickly the cloud. That's the other big thing, as you know. Things are moving from applications to workloads to the clouds. software as a service, that's a big trend that we see. And basically hybrid solutions where people have servers in their own facility, but they also want it in the cloud. And everyone's moving to a services type of model that we'll talk about. So what happens when Hollywood's moved to the cloud, we see optimization. Basically, IT spends drop from 5.2% down to 3.7% when cloud optimizes. And applications, when you're moving OTT applications out, we see application updates from 2010 were about 4 a year, and in 2020 we see about 120 a year. So again, the benefit of Hollywood cloud operations reduction 38%, data center reduction about 50%, and to deploy these OTT applications or software in the cloud, before it was about 3 weeks to roll them out, now we can do them in about 90 minutes. So the new style of Hollywood basically is moving from these traditional cost centers, moving to a cloud focus, more of a service focused delivery of technology to folks. So in summary, you've got to look when you're coming up with this new technology trends of the future. You've got to look at your culture and how you do things. You've got to reduce latency. We see that viewers just don't tolerate latency, and neither do your folks in your workspace. You've got to increase automation with all the tools that are available out there, and increase visibility throughout the company and start sharing information. So that's what we see overall going on in the world. Now, I'd like to start out with the panel discussions. So one of the questions that we were talking about earlier was AVOD or SVOD. I mean, which delivery method is right? And I know we've got a bunch of different folks on the panel that have different views on that. So anyone want to start?
I'm happy to start.
Come on, Steve.
I mean, it's interesting in our strategy from the news front and our audience, not to say they don't want to pay anything, but in the interest of building a large audience, we've taken a generally free approach where all of our OTT apps, all of the, whether it's linear or VOD, is sort of available free, which is great from an audience model, but from a revenue model, how does that balance in terms of building a long-term sustaining business? So something we work on now is, how does an SVOD model work in an ecosystem where the content's for free? Is there more premium content on SVOD? Obviously, there's no ads, but sort of how do you make it an experience where people are used to getting your content for free, and what's the incentive to pay? So that's something we spend a lot of time kind of digging through now as we look to the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I would say most people that are building an online TV and media video experience, once you get an eyeball, you want to hold on to that eyeball as long as you can, right? So I think if you have a variety of either tiers or services that you offer, maybe you have some advertising VOD, and maybe you have a subscription tier, and maybe you even have some transactional things where you can purchase or rent or what have you. I think having flexibility at a platform level is important, so that the people that are out there creating these experiences can experiment with their customer base to figure out, hey, are these the kinds of consumers who would pay for a subscription service to not see ads, or are they the ones who would like to get access to more and they don't mind watching ads, or do I have some premium content that I actually want to sell on an a la carte basis? So I think flexibility is important if you're a content owner.
You've rolled out a ton of these systems around the world. Over the last 12 months, what has been the most frequently rolled out or frequent business model?
Our common deployments are pay TV operators who are looking at extending their service off their network, outside the home, et cetera. So most of it is tied to a core pay TV subscription. So from a consumer standpoint, you're getting it for free. I mean, it's really included as part of your pay TV service, because most operators have found that they can't charge extra for adding mobile. Like that's just a requirement now. So most of what we're doing is it's from a security standpoint, it's behind a pay TV subscription of some sort. So you have to log in, but it's not any different than what you would get if you were at home.
I think it also depends on sort of what your goals are, whether it's that you need the most revenue coming from the service, or you're looking for a greater reach to maybe find revenue from other places. You can make a lot more revenue with a much smaller audience charging people money. To get a lot of money out of AVOD, you need either a huge platform, which very few have, Facebook, YouTube, to name a couple, Verizon's buying Yahoo and AOL to sort of try to create their own sort of giant ad network. But they've been talking a lot about, oh, if Trump loses, is he going to make a Trump TV? And would it be a television network that would go up against Fox News, or would it go over the top? He could probably make a lot more money with a lot smaller audience going over the top, but the type of person he seems to be, my guess would be that he would aim for the television network because it would be a bigger number. He's all about what's the huge number. So I think that's a good context to put it into as far as what you're really trying to get out of the service.
So I got a question. So someone comes up to you and says, I've got 10,000 great titles that I'm going to launch my own OTT network. What would you tell them?
Well, I guess Warner Brothers is trying to do that. They have their Filmstruck, which actually just got pushed back. I was reading today it was supposed to launch in October. It's now launching in November. Probably better off going in an SVOD model. Truthfully, if we're talking, I've got all these great catalog titles. Like, you can get catalog so many different places these days. If if your catalog is, you think you have something exclusive, whatever it might be, you're not going to get, unless you can somehow, find some advertisers that are going to give you a $50, $100, $200 CPM. But there's just so much ad inventory on the internet right now that CPMs really aren't that high.
Well, it also goes to the category. In other words, they're looking at film product, which I think because they own those libraries and they have the deep, the specific deep libraries, and they're not syndicating that to other places at the same time, they can do, to your point about a subscription model, doing AVOD on these Kurosawa movies that they have in that product is a little harder to do, to your point about that. You're not going to get millions of people watching it on a given night. So my response to the question is, yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the content. What's the category? Who's your customer? Are you super serving them? So in 30 seconds or less, we're looking at a travel OTT play, which we clearly see as an AVOD play, but we have something that we're looking at in the film space, which is very catalog driven, very deep, and that's clearly an SVOD play. So it really comes for us as a TV network, as a production entity, as a distributor ourselves. We look at it by category more than just there's sort of one answer to all the pots.
Yeah, and I want to completely echo that, actually.
Ooh, I got something right.
Yes.
Good. Oh, pressure's off.
Because when we design any sort of entertainment solution, we usually always look at content first and use that as a driver to sort of design the entire contextual experience around it. So obviously there's the video experience itself and there's everything around it. I think as soon as you introduce advertising, it's a very different kind of experience than when you have a more sort of premium experience, which is where essentially more SVOD kind of experience. So I completely agree. If you go more long form, if you go more premium, if you go more high end, I definitely think the SVOD solutions are more suitable context for that. Whereby if you go sort of more into the sort of more shorter form, more kind of what seems more sort of native to a TV experience as we know it, I think the AVOD model would make sense. So the answer is, yeah, you want flexibility, but if you go sort of on a service by service level, I think the decision whether you go at AVOD or SVOD informs the entirety of the experience, and that's important to keep in mind. So not complete substitutes.
Very cool. So the audience, how many would you rather watch something for free but watch an ad? And how many would rather say no ads, but I'm going to pay for a subscription? Wow, interesting. Okay.
But not very many.
Not many. How many?
Right now it's about 4.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but I think most people get sated with Netflix and Hulu or whatever.
The problem with say, a Warner Brothers is nobody knows what Warner Brothers is. Like, consumers don't know what Warner Brothers is. They know titles of movies, but they don't know a company. So I wouldn't subscribe to a Warner Brothers because I don't know what they have.
Yeah, and they're
But
branding
all those
it.
movies are all the other places I can
Yeah.
just subscribe to.
They're branding it as Filmstruck, which is, no different than what you're saying with Warner Brothers. It's a brand new. It even has less recognition because it's literally they're making it up. So that does go to your point that even launching under the studio. A lot of people don't know studios, but if you're going to try to make a new brand out of it, that's a whole other exercise in branding as well.
And I have to agree with you because, part of my job is to talk to most of the studios or all the studios in town. And that's what they say. Unless you're a Disney, they have a great brand. If you're a very famous studio, like a Paramount, that have made some of the greatest films, or the other folks, they don't know how to market to consumers. The consumers don't know them. You look at Harry Potter as a great example, right? It's like, well, I see it as an attraction at Universal, but I know Warner Brothers did something with it. Who is it? So I'm confused as a consumer. So
And it's not to
I agree.
say that the studios couldn't create, that what Disney's created. It's just going to take time and money, and they probably should have started 10 years ago.
Yeah, different
but,
DNA, too.
It's a different DNA, but they could do it. People create brands and grow them, and they become real things, and these people already have sort of a step up that some people do know. It does pop up before every single movie you see in the theater. It just doesn't seem to be something they think they can do. I don't know.
I mean, again, it's an interesting point, because everyone in this room could say the same thing about Hulu. Like, what was a Hulu 6 years ago, right? Nobody knew what a Hulu was, and now everybody knows what Hulu is. So when you look at Filmstruck, and I don't know anything about them, I haven't worked with them, so it's not I don't have any inside baseball on it. They're putting an interesting partnership together. They're saying, we're taking Turner Classic, we're taking Criterion. I think there's one or two other film libraries that are part of it. They're going to start putting the power of Time Warner's advertising and marketing behind it. And so in 2 years, will we think of Filmstruck as, what Netflix was 6-7 years ago? Like this really interesting thing with really interesting movies that has great UI and great, 4K, and I throw it to all my devices, and 2 years from now we'll saying, wow, Filmstruck's really a thing. So a lot of it comes down to, like I said, what are the partnerships? What's the UI? And can you execute? Can you do the marketing? Can you get the distribution? If they get it on 25 million Xfinity set-top boxes when you turn on a Comcast thing, that's a pretty good win, right? So I don't want for any of us to draw too big a brush and say, well, Warner Brothers can't succeed. I'd give them a good shot, right? I mean, if anyone's going to have a shot, I'd give them a roll of the dice, right? That's what it comes down to. There's a lot of pieces to get it right.
Well, so the brand you have to build anyway, right? I mean, it's whether you're AVOD or SVOD, you have to build your brand to become a destination, to become meaningful. So it's just about what is your strategy behind leveraging your assets that you have out there, and that's really sort of to build your brand and minimize your investment. So if I look at sort of what Netflix is doing, we just saw the numbers, and internationally how they've grown. I mean, if anything else, they have sort of figured out a really great way to build a brand for themselves around the content that they own, sort of those few shows that they have, and that gets them a lot of mileage out of it. So all the studios, all the networks, when they ever go direct to consumer, that's a challenge they face. They have programs, they have shows that everybody knows, but they really don't know them. And how do you have to build that service, but I think that's something you have to be mindful right from the get-go. You have to make that investment, and you have to do it smartly. And I would argue it's probably if you do it in an SVOD environment, maybe it's easier for you because it puts more urgency around it to actually think about very hard what is your service, so you can actually ask for money for it. Because sooner or later you have to face that question. Otherwise, you just become one of the many players.
Exactly. And what are the exclusives that you can have in
Exactly.
your family, in your library? That's the thing that I think we've just, again, not meaning to bang on Filmstruck positive or negative, but if they can keep things in that family, exclusives that every time you type Kurosawa, or every time you type Criterion, or Discovery, as you guys know, is on every device 24/7 all the time. So every time you type that in, if you have to go to Filmstruck to see that movie, you're going to be incented to be in that system. It's like Hulu did a few years ago. There's a lot of clips, a lot of titles, a lot of stuff everywhere, and slowly, Jason and that great team there, they said, we're going to have full-length episodes. They're going to be stacked here. They're going to be, the whole season, the previous seasons, blah, blah, and it became the only place to watch primetime television. So that's what you have to do. It's a long path. It's not you launch in November, like you said about Filmstruck, and then by December it's going to be the biggest success. It's a road.
I think one of the additional challenges with that example, at least the Warner example, is it's not a completely greenfield opportunity to them. If they were just looking at launching a new service and building a new brand and minimizing our upfront cost, et cetera, and trying to get out there, that would be one thing. But these brands, the content brands, exist elsewhere and are sold into other legacy pay TV operators or what have you. And so I think there's obviously a risk of cannibalizing yourself. And you saw this with HBO when they started going direct, is it starts eating into their bread and butter, which is their a lot of their pay TV subscriptions, and they're also still selling DVD bundles of DVDs and transactional EST kinds of things. So when you're looking at creating a new service like this, you're not building Netflix from scratch, right? You're actually looking at building a new service, and turning one knob over here might mean these other knobs over here get turned, whether you meant for them to or not.
I mean,
So,
that's a fact, right?
yeah.
I mean, when they
and you don't
launch a
wanna-
service, you're gonna piss someone off.
Right. You don't want to. Was the old saying the analog dollars and digital dimes or whatever? I mean, you don't want to like celebrate creating something new and then realize you just you killed the golden goose.
Right, but I think that you have to look at that and say, 5 years down the road, I know my DVD business is going to go down. When do I cut that off? When do I move to this new model? You're right. It's a ballsy thing, but and everyone's driven quarterly, in this country. So that's a challenge. You'd rather put that off to the next guy that may be CEO of that division or president of that division. The guy that makes that call and says, you know what, we're going to do it now. We're going to take a loss in 2 quarters, but we'll come up in the 3rd quarter. That's a big challenge.
And that adds to another part of the challenge that, they are doing analysis. They're seeing, okay, these movies aren't being bought on DVD anymore, for example. Let's throw them into this service. But maybe there's a reason that, people aren't buying the DVDs
Yeah.
anymore. They don't want to watch it. So if you just fill a service with the stuff no one wants to watch, then, they're not going to come watch it anyway.
I mean, that's a good point. So you've got a library, that may be 20 or 30 years old. Why not shoot something new with a new flavor and feel to it? Ghostbusters or, whatever. It's just different. Even though we have the rights to it, maybe folks don't want to watch it that way anymore. Interesting.
But again, you have something like MGM, which has very few new things in production, but that library still throws off a few $100 million a year. So, I think you have to do, again, there's no right or wrong answer, right? You have to be cannibalizing yourself while you're still in business. And if you have a great library, you have a great library. So that's the great thing about it. You can do derivative works, you can put new stuff into production, but if you have a great library, it's going to be able to stand alone. And it goes back to what you guys were talking about on the sort of the cloud side to begin with. It's the discovery, it's finding it, it's making the transaction easy for the consumer, it's not buffering, it's not stressing them out. It's, there's a lot of pieces on the execution side that you have to get right.
I mean, that leads into the next question. So, if you had one, of course, everyone wants both. What's more important, the content or the quality of the user experience? What do you think? This is sort of for you, Ted.
Content.
But you can start out.
Yeah, content. Yeah.
Yeah, we were
Actually-
talking about this a little bit earlier. It's like a news piece, right? So there's an accident on the 405. You want to know what the heck it is. Is it really poor quality, video that you found on Twitter? Okay, that's cool. That's what's going on. Or do I wait, till 5 p.m. and watch KBC with their great cameras and microwave truck? What happened?
Well, so I have a specific experience there, which is I in a former life, I was VP of products for Sling Media, Slingbox. Not Sling TV that Dish does now, but the original Slingbox. So this was 2007, 2008. And I had previously worked on fairly high quality video products. And I went to work for Sling, and I looked at the quality of this video that we were streaming from people's homes out to your phone. And then it was, the iPhone wasn't even out when I started. It was Palm Pilots and Windows mobile devices, and then Google came out with a G1, and then iPhone came out. And I looked at it and I'm like, wow, people are paying to watch this quality video? This is awful. In the first generation of Slingbox. And then I started to realize, well, I would travel internationally, and we had a development center in Bangalore. And so I'm in India working with our development team, and I want to turn on the TV in my hotel room, and it's like, well, okay, I'm going to watch The Tonight Show on my phone in the hotel room or on my laptop, because the other choice was to watch Indian television, which I didn't really understand. And it started to help me realize that absolutely I would suffer through this lower quality video in order to get to watch what I wanted to watch, when I wanted it, and where I was. And I think it was for me, it was very eye-opening seeing that quality really didn't matter to me if the choice was to watch high quality Indian content versus me wanting to watch The Tonight Show or whatever I was watching. It was no contest, right? And so then I realized that the guys who had founded Sling, the reason they founded it was because they were really frustrated with the Major League Baseball blackout rules.
Oh, funny.
And they wanted to get access to their baseball games on their phones, and MLB, even to this day, blacks out local games on your MLB, if you subscribe to MLB on your phone. So it started, so to me, hands down, I know we released the research showing the stress associated with buffering, but
This is the guy that makes the technology to make that user experience better.
hands
so-
down, the content still is more important.
Interesting.
But to your point about news, like maybe there is some sort of argument that it's category specific. Maybe for news where there's a sense of urgency, the user experience is more important, but something like travel, obviously the content is more important.
Well, I think, I mean, we can probably debate what quality really means. I mean, obviously buffering is really bad, and the best user experience can't make up for the fact if you cannot watch the video.
Right.
But I think in general, when you think about how you create the user experience around the content, usually the two of them have to go hand in hand. So, you know, the user experience somewhat expresses what the content is all about. So, you know, you can argue that the user experience of YouTube is not really all that great. But a lot of the content of YouTube, I hope there's nobody from YouTube here, but it's very, I mean, YouTube is
It's also not that great.
yeah, but it's also, but it works. It works quite successfully. You know, on the other hand, if you have more premium content, you want to have a more premium kind of context around the context. So the two really go hand in hand.
Right, I think you
Apart from the
expect that
fact
too,
when it doesn't
right?
work, it doesn't work. That's bad. Nothing can make up for it. It's like a great-looking car that doesn't drive. It's bad news. But at the end, it boils down to, like, you know, who's the audience, what they want, and what's the whole brand expression.
Also, I think once the content is done, you know, it is the piece of content. It can't get any better. Whereas the technology is always improving, and you know, even if the experience isn't great today, a year from now it's going to be better, and 2 years from now it's going to be better. So, yeah, obviously you might have the stress. You might lose someone because there was buffering or the ad load got all messed up. But next year, that's a lot easier to fix than, you know, you're not going to rewrite the show.
Yeah, so maybe I think the industry right now is going through a similar challenge around 4K Ultra HD, right? Which is, would you pay extra to get the same content in higher quality? And so far, the answer seems to be no. That HD, like if you're going to give me UHD as part of my subscription, sure, I'll take it. But if the choice is I can watch HD as part of my subscription or pay more to watch UHD, so far people are saying no.
And I think to your point, there's a lot, as you know, there's a lot in the figuring out the elasticity of the pricing there. So for instance, when Sony had the 4K box on the market last year, they were pricing, you know, new films on that at like, and again, don't quote me, but it was like $39.99 or $45 or something. And then meanwhile on iTunes, that same film was $16.99 or $17. And then the rentals were also, you know, 2-3x. And it's that weird moment where, you know, and I remember one of the movies was Aloha that came out last Christmas, where, you know, I would rent it, I'd be happy to rent it for $5.99. And for the 4K version, I would have spent maybe an extra $1 or $2, but not double, not, you know, 40-50% more. So they have, you know, everyone who's a producer and then the distributor food chain needs to figure the price point out to do that, to make it to you will upgrade to that extra experience. And for a lot of categories, you won't, but for a full-length feature, you might, but it has to be at the right price.
Question, anyone in the audience have a 4K set? UHD set? Oh, okay, less than 1%. Are you going to pay more for that content, for the 4K set? No.
How about HDR?
You have an HDR set?
No.
Would you pay more? If you did, if I gave you one today, would you pay double that price for that content?
Yeah, there's a big difference in HDR, UHD, premium or HDR premium or Dolby.
And maybe the content depends, right? If you're watching the Super Bowl, maybe you want to see every detail to see if the guy was offsides or onside. Or if you're watching an opera, maybe.
So the great point is, would anybody pay more for a great user experience? Right? I think probably not. I think that answers the question. I mean,
Content is king.
content is king. I hate
Remains
to
king.
say it as a designer, but it's true. Yeah, I mean, maybe with user experience and multi-platform experience and having full accessibility, maybe you pay more for. I'm not so sure, but in general, I think that people want simplicity around the user experience and take that for granted.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's they take it for granted, they expect it, they won't stand for a poor user experience.
It's the
But
baseline.
that doesn't mean they'll pay for a good one. Like
So I mean,
Well, I think if you have bad user experience, you usually can't find the content. That's bad user experience.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going to the comment from the gentleman in the second row, I said this on the last season's panel, but maybe it's moved away from a monarchy to more of a democracy where maybe the content's the president, but yeah, the discovery and a bunch of the other things, they're part of it all as well, where, you know, it's no longer a king. The example I used was Louis C.K.'s show that he launched, you know, just he put up on his own website and didn't promote it at all, and now it's going to be going to Hulu, and I'm sure it's going to get a lot more buzz now that it's on Hulu. But you know, just having a great show and just putting it somewhere that no one knows where it is, it's not, you know, not the success formula these days.
Well, in the last 12 months, would you think video platforms have become more flexible or the same? And what are your thoughts? The delivery platforms.
I think they have. Yeah, I think,
In what ways? Give us some examples.
you know, I think if you look at the investments that the big vendors are doing, so Ericsson, Cisco, et cetera, or you look at what the cloud vendors are providing, Amazon with some of their media services, Azure has a bunch of media, Microsoft's cloud has a bunch of media services. I think, or MLBAM or some of the things that are happening in the OVP space. I think the quality of these platforms is getting to the point where you can rely on them to deliver a premium, you know, premium meaning people will pay for it, whether it's advertisers paying or consumers paying. Like, these are real standalone premium platforms, and it's not just used for cat videos and marketing purposes, but I mean, these, you can actually make money with these platforms now.
And they can handle the scale. So
They
if
can
all of a
handle
sudden
the
that cat
scale.
video gets huge and you get, you know,
They can handle the
200
scale,
million
they don't
people.
require an army of IT people to keep it running. They have flexibility around, you know, billing and monetization. I think we've come a long way. I don't know if it's in 12 months or in 3 years, but we've come a long way.
interesting.
There's a lot of options for people, for customers.
Cool. Any other thoughts?
I was just going to say, just to add on to that, I think there's probably some sort of shakeout that's going to happen, and by that, I think to your point, there's a flight to quality with some of these bigger distributors, tech firms in the space. We've been through a lot of meetings, a lot of vendor pitches, a lot of proposals, and there's still a lot of I'd say misinformation. You know, what are their real capabilities? How much do they really do first party versus they're really reselling someone else? You know, how much are they? You know, you get a pitch from a vendor, and then I should have just gone right to Ericsson to begin with, kind of thing. So I think that's still shaking out.
That's why you're in the panel together. Bob.
Exactly. I know. You don't even know. We need like a real cloud answer, like nobody's business. But that's the kind of stuff that I'm hoping will kind of, you know, there's always, when a new market opens, there's always sort of these random players that claim they do all the spots, and then you see really who comes in the second wave and really knows what they're doing. And so I think that's going to happen over the next like 36 months or so. You're really going to see a dramatic shakeout and narrowing of that.
So, I mean, since you've launched the channel, I mean, what were the challenges that you have when you're looking at the platforms and what's out there?
Yeah, like, you know, like we had talked about, we're an interesting, you know, little experiment, test case, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we're not part of Viacom, we're not part of Disney. We're one of the few independent cable nets left in the U.S. in the ecosystem. And so for us, a lot of what we have to wrestle with is working closely with our current distributor partners. And I know that came up a little earlier. So when you're working with the Comcast and the Charters and the Time Warners, you know, I'm not shocking, I'm not the first phone call they return, right? They're dealing with Disney, they're dealing with other big guns. So when they sort of, you have to be the squeaky, you know, wheel a little bit around there to get their attention, to get things authenticated, lined up, get launched on their set-top boxes, get launched on their mobile platforms, things like that. So there's sort of that set of issues. And then, like I was saying, just on the tech side, it's sort of finding the right partners, seeing who's really good in the space, who really can be a long-term partner with us, and then, you know, frankly, you know, we might not be able to afford an Ericsson or an HP or something like that. You guys may just be too big for us at this stage. So how do you find a smaller, nimble partner that can grow with you, and then at some point, hopefully in success, we are big enough to need an Ericsson, an HP, someone like that to do our cloud and do our back end and our back iron and everything. So that's the kind of stuff we wrestle with all the time.
And then also from the content owner side, I think when we originally started in the OTT space, we went to providers who did stuff for us. As it grew and became expensive, we built a framework ourselves so we could kind of run everywhere. But the interesting thing is, with new platforms, as we look to launch a service on set-top boxes, we sort of have this sort of struggle. Do we do it ourselves? Should we go to people who are experts in the space? And then when we grow, do we kind of reevaluate? So it's constantly a struggle versus kind of time, resources, cost, and scale.
Interesting. Much different than a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone would build it themselves and figure out it was too complicated, then they had to bring someone else in. So-
And as you guys know, and then every year, there's an iOS upgrade, there's a
Yeah.
Roku update, there's a Android, new flavor out. So for you're always kind of running on a rolling log, because as soon as you sort of have your app released and the UI is good and you're happy with it and the partner is good, there's oh no, this broke this API and this is a new launch and now I have to integrate Siri and voice search and Alexa and all that. So it's a constant thing if you're a small shop. It's
the
not
challenge
easy.
is the engineers that they read hard to do that. You're competing against Google and Facebook for
Exactly.
these guys,
That's right.
especially with a new shop in town that they're opening or that they have. So,
Yeah.
so question for you guys. So, how, in your opinion, what does Hollywood think of the cloud? Do they like it because it's automating things, or is it still a security threat? What is your thought?
I mean, I'll tell you, I'll put on my old Disney or Comcast hat first, and I'll say, when you're in a big company like that, I think you're going to be skeptical about all of these things as they launch, right? You're going to want to know that you're protected, that the DRM is good, that that all the things you need to do to keep the security where it is good, and you're going to be a very slow rollout partner on that. And then you're always going to have an IT department inside that's going to try to preserve their capital expenditure, their expense every year, and say, hey, we can do it internally. We have smarter people. We're the only one that can protect our own assets. Now, in my role now, in a small shop, I'm like, bring it on. Like anything that can help me get stuff up faster, cheaper, across platforms, more efficiently, I'm like, please help me. So it's I think you're going to always have different approaches based on the size of the company.
So I mean, just maybe a bit on the periphery. I mean, I think what we see again as from a design perspective is the cloud obviously provides a new delivery platform, and I think that's many people how a lot of the Hollywood or the entertainment players seem to look at it. But I think it's also a paradigm shift in the business that really needs to imply a different way to talk to your consumer. To go to your point, it implies brand and implies sort of a new way of packaging in, dialing things up, dialing things down. And I think that is sort of as a new opportunity emerges, I think you really need to sort of make that shift, that you're competing in a different space. You go now have the opportunity to go more direct to consumer, which means you have to think about your brand, you have to think about how you monetize it, you have to think about sort of quality issues, and all of these things you have to think about that other people were thinking about beforehand. And I think that just from a design perspective, so a lot of our clients that we talk to, the people who usually think about those things, you usually don't find those within those departments, within the organizations that really think about that, who think about the cloud. They're, no offense to anybody, they're really techie in engineering, they're not branding people. So I think sort of that ecosystem needs to shift all around to really be successful at bringing this, fully leveraging the opportunity, what the technology can offer.
I think for the big studios at least, most of their internal IT departments are already moving over to virtualization and cloud tech in their internal operations. So I think most enterprise IT people understand the benefit of virtualization versus managing hardware, and the ability to just pull something out and stick another machine in. I think most people like that because it gives them a lot more reliability than in the old days when they had to manage servers and things. So I don't think cloud tech in general is scary to any of the
Which is a change.
studios.
A few years ago, you walk into a studio and they'd say, cloud, I'm not going to put my assets up there.
Well, but so that's where, like public cloud, when you
Right.
start talking about AWS or Azure or what have you, I think then you start talking about the economics, you start talking about the reliability or the effort it takes to get the reliability that
Right.
you want. Cost again, right? Because the more you distribute your service across either multiple cloud, even I used to work at Microsoft, I was surprised how much Apple runs on Microsoft's cloud. I was like, wow, I thought these guys were enemies. Well, it turns out Apple is actually very smart, and they realize putting all their eggs in one basket is not a very good thing to do, and so they run on Amazon, they have their own stuff, they run on Microsoft. Like, they realize for reliability and distribution and service uptime, they need to actually be running across not just their own systems, but also leveraging some of the public clouds. But it gets expensive if you're not careful, especially with media, because egress costs can kill you. So.
Yeah, I think Netflix is trying to build their own, but they've been on Amazon's cloud for quite a while.
And they love Amazon. Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting thing because you've got that SLA. You know, if the contract's written correctly and that thing goes down, yeah, internally you just fire some guys. But if it's a big company, you know, like Hewlett Packard or Amazon, you know, you get a big check. So that's the difference for something like that.
Well, that was for us our first cloud platform we were building was on Azure, and Azure's standard SLA is like 2.5 nines or something. It's like 99.995. I mean, it's like you're not going to run a pay system of any kind at that level of reliability because you can count the downtimes that you're going to have. So we had to do some magic to try to distribute, put a few modules on AWS also for, you know, the high availability things, and we had to put extra effort into getting the level of reliability out of our platform that our customers demanded.
Interesting. Let's see, we've got a few more minutes, so I'm going to open it up to questions, unless you guys want to add anything else to the talks. Okay, any specific questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
So as far as the current state and then future, what about things like multi-layer alpha channel videos with multiple language tracks? So that theoretically, let's say this was news, we could have different inlays that are not part of a static piece of video, which is what everything we've been talking about so far, but like actual alpha channels where you have chunks on the screen that can be from different sources, like a web page delivered in the form of video, where you have different language capabilities. Who's able to do that now? Is that something where people are thinking much careful along the lines, like for example, for sports or something?
We do that in our sports graph. So we have a sports graphic product where we do that already.
So that's multi-channel audio.
Well, I think he's talking about multiple alpha channels. So overlaying, being able to overlay or highlight different parts. So maybe it's for ad insertion in a soccer thing or a baseball field where you might be layering an ad in, or some other thing. And so I think mezzanine or high quality assets are treated one way and then prepped and prepared for different. I mean, we run into this a lot when you've got operators that are adhering to different either local regulatory issues around content, certain content that can't be aired in certain regions, or at, you know, watershed times and you know, where you can't play. Like parental guidance is by time of day when it's broadcast, all kinds of things. So I think asset prep and streaming and things that is a fairly common thing in most, I think, of the media streaming platforms now, is the ability to define an asset and then decide how it's prepped and played out.
I think from a news production standpoint, really quick, I think when we're on the scene shooting something, we think of how do we provide an immersive experience to the audience? Is it 360? Is it augmented reality? I think there are interesting things on news, but also probably something terrifying about being at a news scene as something's happening. So how do you balance that?
Yes, sir.
From the consumer perspective, who do you think is actually working on making the discovery of these various OTT offerings consumable? I mean, I don't think that the set-top OTT stores work. Samsung is a nightmare. I have Samsung at home. So then I do a search on Google and set up an account and struggle to get it on my TV set. I mean, it's fine to get it on your iPad because you're basically in a browser world. But on a TV set, I find it, really the best solution has been Amazon Prime that's beginning to add
Yeah, I was going to say Amazon Prime as well as Roku does a pretty good job with highlighting the top OTT stuff if you have a Roku player.
Yeah, so searching across catalogs and then deep linking into the different catalogs. TiVo's been doing that for a while. I know they continue to invest in that. The Android, Google's been trying to do it with their Android TV products, both on set tops and, like, I have a Sony connected TV that runs Android TV, and it does some of what you're describing. I think the Amazon products, most of them do that okay. A lot of this, there are politics behind a lot of this. It's not just about the pure experience, but also, are you, or is the content, is whoever owns the catalog willing to allow a third party to index their metadata and then use it as part of a recommendation engine, not just search, but also for discovery, because I think you mentioned discovery.
Yeah.
Search is one thing, but
discovery is also just the I don't know if I want to use this term, but sort of the slotting fees or the relationship. So I'd say you guys are talking about Amazon does a good job, Roku does a good job, very good take rates on those platforms, and so does Xfinity. The Comcast Xfinity platform is beautiful and it works really well. And so that comes down to the deal flow about where do you get your box. If your product isn't named Aardvark, AARD, it's not first on the left in that thing, how do you get to the first in the left on that thing? So that would so that's a lot of it, exactly.
Xbox has done a lot in this, and I think they because they weren't investing heavily to compete with a lot of these people, I think they were somewhat more successful in being able to cross-link across these different
and the
brands.
Sony UI is very good these days.
Yeah.
We've met with them a few times, and they're doing some good stuff over there.
What you're describing essentially is chaos, from a consumer point of view.
And part of that's what's been coming up with this whole unlock the box situation where, based on how that regulation comes down, that may become, Google may have free reign to do whatever they want, or it may still be in the situation where there are regulations and the providers can do whatever they want and, pay for play and all that stuff. So that regulation might actually be very important to how that works out.
Well, I think obviously the chaos is mostly driven by the volume of content being available. So you can find great solution within any respective services, and the data is available, and if you put all it together and you have the right design solution, it works. But obviously with that increased fragmentation, then all the stats that you showed beforehand, you're going to have a volume of content, and you unbundle content across left, right, and center. So there's a great opportunity for new services to come that actually bundle and to create meaningful ways for you to find the content that you want to find. That doesn't exist at this point, I would argue. I mean, everything you described is not, I would say, great. It's okay. It's not great. It's still frustrating to find the content you want. That's why usually still what you find in social networks, and that's usually the number one user journey that we talk with most of our clients that are not sort of big players. All that traffic comes from social. That's where people discover things. It's obviously outside your control, and it is somewhat accidental. So it's not perfect if you want to control your business.
I think that's one of our biggest challenges as a small content owner is we're not preloaded on your smart TV or OTT device. So how do we drive people to download? When they download our app, they spend an hour per session, which is great, but there's a massive marketing buy. How do you sort of index the content where people are searching, and how do you drive people so they discover it? Because sort of like cable television, people may have 10 apps they use, and changing the channel or downloading an app, that's a different level of commitment.
Okay, last question. Anyone? Well, there you go. I want to thank everyone for coming out. Thank our panel members. A round of applause. Thanks very much. Okay, thank you very much, folks, for coming out.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's good to see you.
Thank you.